Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm Rachel Takeman and I'm trying to better myself in 2020 by conquering a new goal every month and tracking it all through YouTube videos. Thanks for tuning in to another video. If you haven't yet, click that subscribe button down below. So for today, I had promised a super cool travel video with pictures and videos of where we went and reviews of the things that we were planning to do. Well, the coronavirus threw us a curveball and I didn't really feel like I could just ignore that. So today's video is going to be all about our process of traveling through a pandemic and how our travel plans change daily. I also mentioned in my last two travel videos that I was going to give you guys a final total of how much our trip cost, to give you guys an idea of how much a trip like ours would cost you. Well, our trip ended up changing a lot due to the coronavirus, so I really don't think that the final total will be as helpful as I originally thought. We did have a few unexpected costs because of the COVID-19 virus, which I will tell you guys about. If you're really interested in the price of all this, just direct message me through Facebook or Instagram and I can give you all the details. So this week is all about the bad parts of traveling, or rather the unexpected parts. But next week's video will be more of a highlight reel of all the amazing things we did and saw, and I'll tell you guys about our favorite things and our best recommendations from our experience. I want to preface this by explaining that when we left on our trip, coronavirus precautions were very different than they are now. When we left, we didn't think twice about going because we weren't going to Italy or China or anything like that. When I say that the situation changed daily while we were gone, I mean it. There were no travel bans, no school closures, no toilet paper hoarding. The only advice we had was to wash our hands. So we didn't ignore the safety advice, there simply was none. I also just want to say that this video was really hard to make. I'm super disappointed that our trip was impacted this way, yet I feel like by expressing my disappointment, I'm judged for not recognizing the severity of the situation. I understand how serious this is. We're in quarantine now and we're taking every precaution to slow the spread. I'm not lessening the importance of this. But I do want to say that it sucks that it impacted our travel. And if that offends you, I'm sorry, but this doesn't have to be a polarizing issue. I can be concerned for the fate of our country, our world, and still be bummed that things are being canceled. People are canceling weddings, graduations, proms. These are not small things, and people should feel safe to say that they're disappointed without being judged for not caring. Justin and I saved a lot of money for this trip, and we planned for it for a long time. It was literally once in a lifetime, and it's not something we've ever done before, so it sucks. But life goes on, and I want to tell you guys all about our experience because I hope that you never end up traveling during a pandemic and never have to go through this. So we started our trip in Lisbon, Portugal. Nothing was changed in Lisbon until days later when the travel ban was imposed on mainland European countries. So we just went about our travel plans like we expected to. The next 2 days we spent in Dublin. At this point, the coronavirus was not a real threat in Ireland, so nothing was really changed there. We were still able to use our Dublin pass and go to all the places we wanted to, or at least as many as we had time for. We had a great time in Dublin. There were signs everywhere that reminded people to wash their hands and assured customers that restaurants were being sanitized, but nothing was closed at this point. The only issue we had was that we were informed that the St. Patrick's Day parade on the 17th would be canceled. This was a bummer for sure, but we were assured that people would still be partying in the pubs. Man, how that changed just days later. After Dublin, we rented a car to head up to Northern Ireland. The first day we spent all our time in the city of Belfast, which was still very much open, and the second day we drove up north to some outdoor spots we wanted to see, which also were not impacted by COVID-19. But this was when we started to realize how serious it was getting, mainly in America. While we were here, we heard about colleges closing and public schools closing, but still we hadn't seen too much impact in the Republic of Ireland or in Northern Ireland. After our time in Northern Ireland, we drove down to Hove, and this is when we started to feel the impact of coronavirus on our trip. Sunday morning, we woke up to the news that Donald Trump's travel ban would now include Ireland and the UK, where previously it had excluded these two countries. Sunday morning was the first time we talked seriously about coming home. We didn't really want to, and at that point in our travel, our trip wasn't impacted by the virus at all. But we discussed whether we were making the responsible choice by staying and continuing on. But after seeing the pictures of the massive crowds at O'Hare Airport and the other few airports that were still open, we decided against coming home at that point. We figured we would probably be safer going on with our trip rather than going to a crowded airport like that. So we continued on with our trip and still planned to come home on Sunday the 22nd, hoping that the airports wouldn't be so crazy busy a week later. We didn't realize this, but on March 13th, the Irish government instructed tourist attractions and cultural institutions to close. They also directed group gatherings to be canceled if they were over 500 people outdoors or 100 people indoors. We didn't realize this until we went to the National Birds of Prey Center, where we were supposed to learn about falconry. It was closed, and the sign said that it would be closed for the rest of the month. This was the first real disappointment that we had on our trip, but we were still determined determined to make the best of it. Instead of going to Birds of Prey, we went right to our Airbnb and we got to spend more of the day in Cork. But in Cork, we just found disappointment after disappointment. The next few days, it just felt like everything closed right before we arrived. We weren't too worried about the notice that we saw at Birds of Prey because most of what we wanted to do in Cork and Galway was in nature or just walking around and touring the cities. So it wasn't as many touristy things like we wanted to do in Dublin and London. But once the tourist attractions closed, many pubs and breweries did too. One of the main things we wanted to do in the city of Cork was to go to a few craft breweries. Cork is known for craft beer in Ireland, but the ones we wanted to see were all closed, and most local pubs were too. This was really hard because I don't know about you guys, but travel to me is all about the local flavors. And not to mention the fact that we were at Airbnbs and we literally couldn't just cook for ourselves. But even though we weren't able to choose between all the coolest places to eat in Cork, we still found a few good places with Irish food, so it could have been worse. It was a little strange walking around and seeing all the businesses closed, but the city was still alive and bustling. And since it was Sunday, some of these places might have been closed anyway. Another thing that happened while we were in Cork was that the host of our Airbnb in London contacted me and let me know that he was experiencing some of the symptoms of coronavirus. He assured us that he was self-quarantining, and he let us know that if we canceled, we would not be penalized and we would get a full refund, but that if we wanted to keep our reservation, he was still willing to host us and he would just keep his distance. But this left us with a decision to make. I started to look into some other places we could stay in London, but just didn't make a decision immediately. On the morning of the 16th, we were planning to go to the Cliffs of Moher. On our way there, we stopped in Limerick to get some food. It was a ghost town. We walked by dozens of empty pubs before we finally found a corner with 3 open cafes. Nothing was open in Limerick. After the Cliffs of Moher, we headed up to our Airbnb in Galway. After chatting with our Airbnb host for a while, we took a bus to the city centre. On our way there, I received an email from the Playhouse Theatre in London saying that they were closing and would be cancelling all shows. This was the only thing I didn't tell you guys about in my travel videos. Justin's birthday is March 26th, so I planned an extra special birthday surprise for him. I bought tickets for us to see Emilia Clarke perform at a theatre in London. Literally once in a lifetime. But it was cancelled, so I broke the news to Justin. We were super bummed about that, but it seemed like it was the only thing that was closed in London, so we were still really excited about the rest of our trip. When we got to Galway city centre, it was empty, just like Limerick. It was nighttime, so we weren't even looking for tourist attractions or anything like that. I knew that all the cathedrals and castles would be closed. We were just looking for a pub to eat at. There was only one place open in Galway, a little Italian restaurant. We walked around for a while afterwards and saw hardly any people and hardly any businesses open. It was so crazy. That night, I narrowed down our London Airbnb search to book a new one, but I fell asleep before actually booking the one we were looking at. The next morning, March 17th, I woke up pretty early and I just had a feeling. I might have just been bummed that the parade was canceled and the play in London was canceled, but I just woke up certain that we should come home. So I started looking into flights and looking into our cancellation policies for everything we had planned for London. Then when Justin woke up, we talked about it and we agreed that we should probably book a flight home. I spent that whole morning making the plans. Airbnb was the easiest to cancel. They gave us a full refund for our original London stay and put it back on our card. And I didn't actually go through with booking a new place for our London stay, thank goodness. Aside from Airbnb, we had some touristy things that we had scheduled. One of these was the theater tickets in London. I got word a few days later that they would be refunding the tickets, so they gave us a voucher in the amount we paid for to use on tickets in the future. Another thing we paid for in advance was our London passes. On the 17th, they had yet to close all the attractions, so I figured they wouldn't be giving refunds. But the London pass is actually good for a whole year after it's purchased, so I doubt they'll give refunds if it's good till January of 2021. The last thing we paid in advance for was the bus tour. Again, on the 17th, things like this were not yet canceled, but we got word a couple days later that it was canceled and that they would be giving a full refund in the form of a voucher for a future trip. I canceled both our flight from Dublin to London for the 18th and our flight from London to JFK for the 22nd. Both airlines gave us travel vouchers to use on a future trip, but it didn't process until a week later. So another thing that we could use for a future trip, but it didn't help us for this trip. I definitely would have rather had a cash refund for these expenses because our plane tickets were so much more expensive than expected. I know people were making jokes about finding cheap flights because of coronavirus, but I don't know where they were finding them. We found the cheapest possible flight home and it was $500 each, which if you saw my first video, $1,000 total is more than we spent on all of our flights combined when we originally booked them. Our intended flight home for the 22nd was only about $450 for the both of us. So needless to say, $1,000 was a tough pill to swallow, but I felt so sure that this was the right move, rather than to go to London and just be disappointed at every turn and struggle to find restaurants to eat at. And sure enough, later that day, our original flight home was canceled. A couple days later, everything in London was closed, and a few days later, the travel ban got even more strict, and we would have been stranded in Europe if we had stayed. It definitely was the right move to make, just a painful price tag. But we had saved enough for the worst case scenario, in case of an emergency just like this, so we booked the $1,000 flight. It left about the same same time as our intended flight from Dublin to London, so we still continued to Dublin for St. Patrick's Day. I knew that Dublin was going to be a ghost town just like the other cities, and that it would be super disappointing. But Justin wanted to go out and have one last Guinness and make the most of our trip. When we got off the bus, we were in an area I didn't really recognize right away, but when we walked around the block, I realized that we were right in the center of the city, a place that was bustling just a few days earlier. I can't even explain how devastating it was to see Dublin so empty on St. Patrick's Day. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that not a single pub was open. We walked around for a long time before finally finding one place that was serving food, another Italian place. It was good food, not Irish food though. And we did have our last Guinness, but it was poured from a can, and it wasn't even poured right. It was so disappointing. On the 18th, we got up bright and early to start our long travel day. We flew Aer Lingus from Dublin to Gatwick Airport in London, and then waited for a few hours. Our flight from Gatwick to JFK was delayed, which was fine by me as long as it didn't get canceled, and thankfully it didn't. Our flights were actually really nice. Most of the normal hassles of airplane travel were gone because there was hardly anyone on the plane. We didn't have to wait to board because the planes were only like 10% full. Literally, on our flight from Dublin to Gatwick, there were only 25 passengers. Gatwick to JFK had more passengers, but we still had a whole row to ourselves, which also meant that there was plenty of room for overhead luggage, which is usually a hassle. We also got extra snacks and drinks because they had extra. And when it was time to exit the plane, everyone got off so quickly and easily, compared to the usual, where people are standing up and fighting to get their luggage down just to stand and wait for 20 minutes. Other than flight cancellations, my other main concern was that it would be crazy busy at JFK and would take forever to get through customs. To my surprise, it was the exact opposite. We filled out a paper before exiting the plane that asked us where we had been and if we were experiencing any symptoms. When we were getting off the plane, there were a few medical professionals waiting at the door of the plane who took our temperature, asked if we were experiencing any symptoms, and then took that paper. They gave us a letter from the CDC instructing us to self-quarantine for 14 days. After that, it took about 10 minutes to get through customs and about 10 more minutes to find our luggage and leave. This was really nice because it was pretty late at night, and since we were used to a different time zone, it felt even later. So we have been in self-quarantine since the 18th, and we've not left the house for anything except to pick up our cat. It's so crazy looking back and seeing how much changed in just 10 days. Like I said, we're really bummed that our trip was cut short, but honestly, we got to do so much considering the circumstances. If we were traveling just a few days later, we wouldn't have been able to do anything in Dublin, and our whole trip might have been canceled. Overall, we had a great time just being together and being in a new place. We fell in love with Ireland, and we can't wait to go back. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again. I hope this video and the other two travel videos have been super informative and helpful. If you like this video, click the thumbs up button down below, and make sure you tune in next week for the final part in my travel series so that you can hear about the highlights of our trip. And next week, I'll be telling you guys about what my April goal is. If you haven't yet, click the subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell so that you don't miss a video. And comment down below how you guys are doing with all the coronavirus craziness. I hope you guys have an awesome week, and I'll see you next week.